Welcome to Diamonds and Dumpster Fires, the show where we talk about finding strength when life falls apart. I'm your host, Melly, and around here, resilience isn't perfection. It's falling flat, getting back up, and maybe laughing about it later. From breakups to breakthroughs, we mix faith, neuroscience, and a little sass to help you rebuild a life that actually feels like yours. Are you ready? Let's go. Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of Diamonds and Dumpster Fires, the podcast where we find hope and humor when life doesn't go as planned. Today, we are tackling a topic that I know hits home for so many of us: how to rebuild your confidence after rejection, whether that rejection happened in divorce, dating, friendships, jobs, or any area where your heart was fully in it and the outcome was not what you hoped for. If you identify as anxiously attached, or you've ever been told you're too sensitive, this conversation is for you. Because rejection doesn't just sting, it can rattle your sense of self-worth, your ability to trust, and even how you show up in future relationships. And to help us unpack this, I am thrilled today to welcome Sheilanova Cornelio. She is an anxious attachment coach who helps people rewrite old emotional stories, tap into their inner resilience, and build healthy, fulfilling relationships. Her work blends emotional healing, science, and practical tools to help clients move from fear-driven responses to empowered action. Sheilanova, I'm so excited to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much, Melly. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, this is exciting. And for those who are wondering how I met Sheilanova, she was my coach, so I can say firsthand that her techniques work, and we are going to dive into those. But before we dive into more of the strategy side of things, can you share a little bit about what drew you to help people work through attachment wounds?
Oh my gosh, I was a hot mess. Let's start there. I was deeply, deeply insecure in myself, but I did not present that outwardly. Outwardly, you would have called me very confident. You would have said I was a go-getter. And I kind of showed up like that. I mean, I portrayed what I would consider now a false sense of confidence. I could get myself through the door. I could attract the guy. But then once I was in the relationship, it's like that outer shell of false confidence would completely crumble, and I would either spiral, I would become desperate and clingy. I didn't know how to, have conflict. I would obsessively overthink about every guy I caught feelings for. And I did some really crazy stuff. I mean, I think of the technology that we have now, and I'm like, I would have been on a Lifetime movie if I would have had access to the. And just for anyone listening, what you're, like, what in the world could this woman have done? Okay, here's how crazy I used to be. I once remotely hacked into an ex's work computer from his laptop, downloaded all of his passwords, changed his Google settings so that his Google Chrome address tracked his IP location. And that way, anytime he opened up his iPhone, I jerry-rigged his iPhone as a GPS system so I could track his every location. And I mean, you're probably thinking like that is psycho behavior, and absolutely it is. And that is what anxious attachment drove me to do. It drove me just to completely be out of my mind and do things that, and I remember when I was doing that, I was like watching myself doing it. I was thinking, this is crazy. Like, I can't believe I'm doing this. Now I can tell you that story because I have no shame about it. So that's where we came from.
Amazing.
I took everything personally. I was offended by everything anyone said. I did this work on myself to the point where nothing offends me now. I take nothing personally. It's impossible to offend me. I became bulletproof to rejection. In fact, I felt often delighted in the face of rejection, which completely blew my mind. And I now can say that I'm in at least one of the healthiest relationships that I know. I'm married. We have a 4-year-old, and I would say that's a huge success story.
Yeah, definitely. Now, For those who may not be familiar, and maybe, they haven't, probably because they don't know how to hack a phone, haven't been able to necessarily do that.
Don't do that.
Yeah, don't do it. But if they're like, I don't know if I'm anxiously attached, like, how would you describe that for somebody who's trying to figure it out?
Yeah. Whenever you catch feelings for someone, do you just completely obsess over them? Like you are waiting by the phone for their text. You are always wondering, are they going to text me? Are they going to or you'll have these thoughts where you're like, once they find out the real me, they're going to run. And then that's your typical experience.
Yeah.
You feel very insecure, especially on the inside, although you might not present that way on the outside like I did. You might present very confident, but you don't feel that way. You're just completely preoccupied with the other person. You're always worried they're going to leave me, they're going to find out something's wrong with me. You never feel enough. You feel too much for somebody. It's just this deep sense of insecurity. And really, it's all rooted in the belief of either I'm not worthy until I'm chosen, I'm not worthy of love, I'm not enough, there's something intrinsically wrong with me.
Interesting. And I know for many listeners of this podcast who a lot of them have gone through divorce, they talk about that, struggle with internal narrative of like, I wasn't good enough for my spouse, so I'll never be good enough for someone else, or no one's going to want me now that I, have gone through this like financial ruin from a divorce. What would you say to someone to start interrupting those stories?
Well, I think, and also on the topic of rebuilding confidence, we have to understand that we have 60,000 thoughts a day. Like our brains just never shut the hell up. Like they're just constantly running with thoughts. And if you think about 60,000 thoughts divided by like the number of seconds we're awake, it's about a thought per second. And a thought is simply just a sentence in your brain. It's even when you say the thought like, no one's ever going to find me attractive again. That is a thought. Now, thoughts are not facts. Thoughts are these sort of, I like to call them these like little delusions that we think of. But we take them so seriously. And many of the time, your brain is lying through thoughts. And we're just taking these thoughts at face value. So really separating yourself from your thoughts, I think, is the most important step. Not just intellectually recognizing that you're not your thoughts, but actually experiencing that you're not your thoughts.
Right. And that can be really transformational. I remember when you and I were working together, like it seems like, okay, yeah, your thoughts are not facts. And yet when you first had me really like, we did that thought exercise and I was writing it down and it was like, I was spiraling over a guy, going crazy because he hadn't been texting me back and decided we weren't a match. And I thought my world was completely over. So I found Sheilanova thanks to the Instagram algorithm. And I knew I had to work with her. And just doing that work of like realizing like, okay, so this guy didn't text me back. I remember you saying something like, oh, that's all we know. Like he didn't text you back. That's the information. And I was like, but it means he doesn't like me or it means I'm not good enough. And you're like, no, it's not what it means.
Right. It's first about separating out the circumstance versus the thought. So the circumstance is like neutrally, factually what literally happened. And so even when I have a client say like, she didn't or he didn't text me, like he's not responding to my messages. I'm like, that is a thought, not a circumstance. So tell me the actual circumstance. Okay, the last time, he texted was at 9:32 on Tuesday. Okay, got it. And can we just sort of go to that place without the thought? And I'm not saying that you should feel neutral about that but we have to separate like what literally happened versus our interpretation of it and what we're choosing to make that mean. Because ultimately, what we do have control over is the way that we think. Now, we might not have control over every thought that enters our mind, but we do at some point have control over what we think about those thoughts. And that is our capacity for metacognition, is thinking about your thinking.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So for the person who's like, okay, I'm divorced and therefore no one's ever going to want me again. The thought is that no one's going to want me again. That is the thought that we have to work to reverse. Is that correct?
Yeah, because that thought, if you're operating unconsciously under that belief system, you will create that. Like you'll create the facts of that. It's just your life will look like a reflection of that. Meaning that when you get on the dating scene and, all of a sudden you become attracted to someone who's unavailable. It's like, because that's sort of proving your own belief system true.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you literally almost self-sabotage yourself because you're not picking the guy that would actually treat you well and like you. You're picking, and I'm saying you, but it's me, as I've done this, picking the guy
Yeah.
that you like know from the start is like emotionally kind of evasive and hard to get. And so I think when you're in that anxious attachment too, that is appealing because we think, "Ooh, if I could win this person over, then I have worth," right?
Right. Then I'll prove my worth. And so you just have to realize nothing's, for how I like to look at this, nothing's gone wrong when this is happening. I mean, I get that when you're in it, you're like, this sucks. And my life feels like it's, just spiraling downwards. But your brain and the way you're operating is exactly how the input is being trained. So like the brain doesn't care what the input is. And the input here would be the thought. So the thought is, I'm not worthy until I'm chosen. The brain doesn't care what the input is. It just cares about, proving it true. And I say true with big, giant air quotes because true doesn't equal factual. It just means you feel like it's true. But just because you feel like something's true doesn't make it true. So the brain will subconsciously just scan for any evidence to try to prove any belief system true, even if the belief is, I'm worthy no matter what. And so that's why when you don't have a lot of self-worth, like you don't believe in those things, it's like, I'm worthy no matter what. Your brain's going to be like, let's go be attracted to the person that's completely emotionally unavailable. And it'll be like, see, I told you no one loves you. See, that thought's true. But it would do the same thing if you also had the opposite thought. I'm worthy no matter what. The other thing that I think you have to do when you're or recognize when you're doing these exercises, the other thing you can do is when you close your eyes and you like silently scream in your mind, you know how you can like kind of hear a voice
Mhm.
or you talk, right? So if you're closing your eyes and you say the thought that's rooted in like this not enoughness, this unworthiness, if you say it out silently in your mind, I almost said out loud, but you're not saying it out loud. You're saying it silently in your mind, but I do it with forcefulness, almost like you're screaming it silently.
Mhm.
See if you can imagine the direction that it comes from. Does it come from the left-hand side of your brain, the back of your brain? Is it the back right-hand side of your brain? Is it the upper right? It doesn't matter where it comes from. It matters that you find the location. Because once you can start to see or notice that the voice or the sound of that thought is located somewhere, it starts to become separate from you. You start to notice there is a space between you and that thought.
Okay, interesting. So you just literally close your eyes, you think the thought, you don't like try to stuff it down and not think it, but you just notice where it's coming from.
Right.
Okay.
And for me, like interesting is I'll do this with a lot of thoughts. I don't have the thoughts anymore. Like I'm not worthy until I'm chosen, but I'll do it with other thoughts. And I find that like a lot of that noise comes personally for me from to the upper right-hand corner of my mind. And so it's like, okay, if the thoughts are in the upper right-hand corner, where am I technically? And I notice that I'm sort of behind the thought. And me in the sense would be considered my awareness. So your awareness, you might call that your consciousness, the essence of you, your soul. That part of you doesn't have thoughts. So if you're not your mind, if you're not your thought and you're the thing watching it, you're the awareness behind it. Noticing that those two things are separate will help you to get distance from this thought or essentially create separation from it. And it's important that you experience that and not just know it intellectually. And so practicing closing your eyes and doing that, you actually don't even have to do it with your eyes closed. I just find it's a bit easier for the imagination to do that.
Yeah.
But if you can find where it's located, and then you can be like, okay, if it's over there, then where do I notice my consciousness viewing this, my soul viewing this, my awareness viewing this? Then you can notice that there's a space in between it, that this is not you, even though it might feel true. And thoughts that are rooted in other unworthiness or not enoughness, they are going to create an emotional reaction or emotional feeling.
Mhm.
They are going to create an emotion because thoughts create feelings, not what your ex did, not what happened in the divorce, not what other people say to you. Those don't create your feelings. It is your thought and your interpretation of that event that creates the feeling. And so when you think that thought, you are going to have a feeling. What a feeling literally is a vibration in your body. So you can also locate that vibration in your body. It's simply an emotional sensation. It's like a heaviness, a tightness, a pressure. It usually shows up either in the chest, the neck, the throat, the belly, sometimes even the head. But if you can also close your eyes and notice, okay, where is that feeling that the thought creates? Can I notice there's a space between me and that feeling? You don't try to get the feeling to go away. And the next step is to really objectify that feeling. So objectifying just means imagining it as a physical object. Again, not trying to get rid of it, but what would it look like if you took it out of your body? Would it look, would it have a color? Would it have a shape? Would have a sometimes I'll get people to personify it. Does it have a voice? Does it have a personality? Because the more that I can get you to see or yourself, the more you can get to see something as separate than you, the more you won't identify with it, the less you'll believe it, the less you'll take it personally, the less you'll take the thought personally. And we do this in everyday life with even everyday objects. You don't carry around, although a lot of us carry around our phone a lot of the times because we're all addicted to our phones. There's not a part of us that goes, oh my God, this phone is a part of my hand and I can't use my hand and it's awful and I wish this phone wasn't here. Like, why do I have to have this phone in my life? But we do that with thoughts and feelings. We're like, I
Interesting.
don't want to feel this way. Why do I have to feel this way? Like as if it's part of us and the essence of us. And so when you can experience and objectify your feelings and your thoughts, meaning it's like turning them into a separate object than yourself and visualizing that, it really helps you to recognize and experience, oh, I can actually put this down like I can put my phone down.
Wow. Yeah, and that is such an interesting concept because, yeah, but it feels like thoughts are, we can't get rid of them. And I know even just from conversations I've had with other people who've also gone through divorce, or when you start verbalizing those together, like I know I've been on the phone and we're like, oh yeah, we both have gone through this. And, oh, no one will ever want us. And you just start feeling it. Like I can feel like my chest will
Right.
start tightening, and you
Mm.
actually create that feeling when you maybe weren't even feeling like I might not have even been on the dating apps for months, but then I'll just start talking about it, which will make me think about it. And then I'll start feeling icky about it. And that's really interesting. So we really do have a lot of control over how we feel based on our thoughts.
Yeah. I mean, your whole entire experience of life is created by your thoughts, not what's necessarily, it has way less to do with what's literally happening outside of you or what people say. And when you really start to dig into this, you might have an existential crisis at some point because you'll realize, oh my God, I'm living in a delusion of my own creation. And I'm like, yes, you are. So pick the delusion.
Wow. Yeah, no, that I've definitely experienced that. Yeah, when you realize like I'm creating this reality for myself, and why if I'm going to create a reality for myself, why am I creating one that sucks, right?
And that's not to say, force yourself to think thoughts that you don't believe in. Like that's going to have an opposite effect on you. Your brain just going to reject anything that you don't completely believe in. But you can try on thoughts kind of like clothing items. Some clothes just fit and flatter you, right? And some are
Mhm.
like, no, put that right back up on the hanger. Absolutely not, right?
Yeah.
But some are like, yes, yes, this feels good. And those thoughts can be simply from, okay, no one's ever going to find me attractive again. No woman's ever going to want what, I have anymore. And I think instead of thinking, no, I'm amazing and everyone's going to find I'm attractive, no way your brain's going to believe that. Instead, you can be like, maybe this thought isn't entirely true. Or maybe I'm wrong about this because brains get it wrong a lot of the times, and that is okay. Just because this feels true doesn't make it so. And it is okay that I believe this right now. My brain is just simply having a thought error.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah. I also do the like, is this 100% true? Like, if I'm in a mode of like, no
Right.
one will ever find me attractive, sometimes what helps me is I'm like, does everyone even know me? Like, no, not everyone even has seen me. So it's not possible that everyone finds me unattractive.
Right.
And kind of like,
Right.
start to ease yourself in, right? Because, yeah, sometimes you hear this advice of like telling yourself affirmations. And I know there is a lot of positive feedback on that, but I hear from people like, I'm not going to sit and look at myself in the mirror and say, oh, you're so beautiful, or oh, you're so handsome, when I don't feel it. And it's like, okay, well, you don't have to do that, but maybe don't look in the mirror and say, nobody will ever find me attractive.
Right. It's like, exactly. Like, I'm not a big believer of like affirmations. I don't like using them on myself, but I do like, where it's kind of playing a game with myself where might I be wrong about this? Or sometimes what I'll do is I'll imagine that not enoughness thought as like a little personality of its own. I call it like an entity. Because again, I've practiced objectifying all my thoughts and feelings. So it's like I see them as separate from me anyway. So then I can have a conversation with it. And so the last time I did this with myself, it was around money. And I realized I had the belief that I wasn't like 100% worthy if I was in credit card debt. And I imagined this little belief as this character. It was a very shame-based character too, because it was always like trying to beat myself up for my overspending habits. And I looked at that little character and I said, okay, I know that we don't believe that, like, because I said at one point I was like, I said it out loud. I said, I'm 100% worthy with or without credit card debt. And that like little guy in me was like, 100% absolutely not. Like, are you kidding me? Are you out of your mind? You need to shut up. And I was like, okay, I was like, that was too far. But then I was like, okay, but what? I was like, let's just play a game. What if in like some fantasy world that was right? What if we were 100% worthy with or without the debt? Where would we find evidence for that? And I allowed it's like that belief system to come up with the new belief instead of me coming up with it. Like I treated it as a little personality. And one of the first ideas that it came up with was it like, well, if a baby inherited debt, it would totally be like 100% worthy. And I totally believed that because it came from inside me. It came from like within the belief system of the other belief system. And so you can kind of try this on in terms of it's like rebuilding that confidence from going from the thought of, no one's ever going to find me worthy or attractive or valuable or whatever, and treat that little belief system as like a little personality that you kind of want to befriend and have a relationship with. You're not trying to convince them out of their pain or their suffering. You're just like, hey, I think you might have the answer to the I might not have the answer, but you might. But if I ask you just really powerful questions, then you might come up with some better ideas. And you treat it like that. And your brain likes playing these games with you. And in the beginning, my brain was like, well, it might be 10% true that you're worthy with the debt, but you've done all of this and blah, 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 blah. But I still kept going with it. And I did that over the course of it was less than 2 weeks. And I had completely flipped the belief.
Wow.
To the point where when I said even out loud, I'm 100% worthy with or without the debt, my brain responded with duh, of course, yeah, why would you think otherwise? So there's lots of ways to switch beliefs, change beliefs. But again, you got to see and experience the belief and the feeling attached to it as separate than you.
Yeah. And you have to actually do conscious effort to do that. You can't just say, okay, I'll see it as separate. Like I know from when we were working together, that was hard for me. I think because I was so ingrained in those patterns for so long, it was just who I was, that it felt like a major shift to start moving out of that. What would you say to someone who's kind of they're in the midst of it right now and they're like, I can't even do it. They are literally going through the divorce. They're selling the beautiful house that they had. They are losing money to lawyer bills and all this. And they're like, I'm just drowning in this and I'm spiraling and I don't know how I'm going to change my thoughts because all of this stuff is in the midst of happening.
Yeah, I think you have to latch onto some kind of belief that goes I'm not supposed to see the end of the tunnel right now.
Okay.
Right? It's whenever whenever I've experienced some kind of event that I would classify as traumatic, and I would classify divorce as like a identity crisis. It's completely life-changing. It's important to tell yourself and think things in that moment that it's like get you through that moment. Like, just because I can't see the light at the end of this tunnel doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I'm at the point, everyone is on like at some point in our journeys, we are in the spot in the journey where you cannot see the other side of it. Like every great movie is made this way. When you think about it, like there's always the point in the movie where the protagonist, like everything sucks. You do like nothing seems to ever going to be changing, and then it does. So you have to remind yourself, this is the part of the journey where I'm not supposed to see the other side of this yet.
Right.
And that allows you to accept where you are. Like, I'm not supposed to see the other side of this right now because simply I don't. I'm going through it.
Right. And that's okay to be in that spot. But what I know, like from people, I've been to different groups and things where you meet somebody who they had that belief, this is just where I'm at. I'm going to get through it. And they do. They come out, the other side. Maybe they find love again. Maybe they don't, but they build this life that they really enjoy. And then I also meet people who are 10, even 15 years post divorce, and they're still wallowing in it. And would you say that it's this allowing those thoughts to become beliefs and feelings that is keeping that person, from not realizing a good future for themselves?
Yes, you play a part in the results that you create in your life. And if you can take responsibility for those results that you're creating, you will feel empowered to change them. Taking responsibility does not feel like blame. Taking responsibility can look like this. You ask yourself, okay, what part am I playing in to create this? Now, there's a caveat to how you answer this question. You cannot answer this question in any way that there is something wrong with you. There's absolutely nothing wrong with you. And if that's the premise, answer the question on how you play a part in creating the current results that you have in your life. And you're on the right track because the answer you'll come up with, which by the way is just a thought, but the answer you'll come up with will make you feel empowered or a sense of relief.
Okay. So if somebody is coming up with an answer and they're feeling shame or guilt or regret, then they are
That's
on
not
the wrong path.
responsibility. That's blame. That's
Okay.
self-blame.
And what do you say to the person who's like, well, but I did cause this. I was the one that maybe left my marriage, or I did something that caused my spouse. So I am to blame. And they kind of get stuck. I'm sure you've talked to people that kind of get trapped in those shame or blame patterns. Like, how do you get them out of that?
Right. Again, it's answering the question, if I'm actually not to blame, because that is a thought, that's not a factual thing you're saying. Again, we talk in thoughts and we convey our thoughts as if they are the news, and they're not. So if you actually weren't to blame, and you were always supposed to leave your partner simply because you did, if that was always supposed to happen, right?
Yeah.
Then why aren't you to blame? It's like, for me, the answer is because it's a way of choosing to look at it. You don't have to be, it's like, I'm at fault and I'm a bad person and I should have never done this, or like I hurt somebody and that equals I'm a bad person.
Right. Yeah. And I love what you said about like, it was supposed to happen because it did. And I remember you saying that to me when I was just completely just distraught over one guy from the apps that I had known for, I don't even know, it was a matter of like months. And we weren't even like that close, but I was like, I really like just locked into him as like he was everything I needed and more. And I just completely downward spiraled when that situationship blew up. And I remember like saying, no, I'm meant to be with him. I know it. I was like all upset. And you said, you know how you're not? Because you're not, or something of that nature. Like you were meant to not be with this guy because you're not with the guy. And it was like, huh.
Yeah, you're not, that was never supposed to happen because it didn't. And and the other thing I hear, when you think, it's like when we think that we need somebody else so desperately, like we need this person to feel safe, we need this person in our life to feel secure in ourselves. That's because we have not made our own feelings, the own insecurity feelings within us, feel safe with us. And that is something that we can do by again, going into our body when we feel those feelings, not trying to push them away, experiencing them as emotional sensations in the body without attaching meaning to them, and looking at them like objects. Looking at them as things that are separate from us, looking at them like these little beings of personalities or entities. You can get very creative and like kind of fun when you do this, but it's about showing that part of you, you are safe with me. And one of the reasons why I completely got rid of all of my desperation, because God, was I so desperate, was because I really learned how to make all of the feelings within me feel so safe and seen and heard and loved and valued by me. And so whenever I do get a big feeling, or whenever I do experience anxiety, and I don't experience it at the intensities that I used to anymore, well, or very rarely, but when I do have any kind of big feelings, it's like those feelings immediately are all like, you know, the best person to solve this issue? Sheilanova. That's the best person. Like, let's go to her, because I have cultivated this relationship between me and my feelings that is one where I make them feel so seen and so heard and so accepted and so loved by me. And when you are creating a feeling of seen and acceptance and love within yourself, you are not desperate to get it from other people. Now, of course, you might have a genuine desire to to create that or co-create that with somebody else, but you're not desperate for it.
Right. And there is a big difference. I can just say from, I thought finding another person was the absolute ultimate goal of my life back, a few years ago. And, while I would love to find a person, it's not something that like rules my life anymore. Like I went out on a
Yeah.
date, didn't turn out to be a match, parted ways, no big deal. Like, great, didn't work out, that just means that wasn't my person. And I could accept that whereas opposed to like 3 years ago, I would be probably laying on the living room floor, like refusing to eat for a day or something super dramatic because one guy was like, I don't think we're right for each other.
Right. I was totally the same way. Or I would just be completely stalking his social medias for like weeks or months after, even if we went on like 2 dates.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I've done that where you're like, who's even following now? Oh, wait, I had like 302 followers. Now it's 303. It must be a woman. Let me go. And I would like go and like check and look and be like, oh, she's new. Who's she? Click her profile. What a mess, right?
Yeah, but also I just want to say for anyone listening, if you're doing that, I think that you are so incredibly creative and you have a sense of ingenuity about you, and it's just channeled in a way that doesn't serve you. Because when I look back at all this stuff and even all the stories you've told me, Melly, and I'm just like, wow, that's so wild. There's a sense of pride that I have in it, not because of what I think I did was right. It's that I'm like, damn, I have the kind of creativity that could maybe build $1 million business. Like
Yeah.
like whenever I see someone doing some really interesting like stalking stuff, like soft stalking online, I'm like, girl, did you know you could be a millionaire? Like seriously.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, I feel like, the CIA, FBI, they should be recruiting from us anxiously attached ladies, Or guys too.
100%.
Maybe guys do the same thing. I don't know if guys do the same thing with the internet stalking that we ladies do, but they probably do.
I still have that superpower. About a year ago, I was on like one of those Facebook like marketplace, like where they, where you sell your stuff. And
Mhm.
someone was like, this guy scammed me. He's already blocked me, but if any of you guys know him or like know anyone that knows him, I want my stuff back or I want my money back. And I was like, oh, hell no. I was like, this is not going to happen on my watch. I was like, 5 minutes later, I was like, here's his mother's phone number and his father's address and his brother and his sister and his cousin lives there. And like everyone on the comments was like, oh my God, what, like, are you like the FBI? And I was like, in another life.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I know one time from a picture from a guy that I'd been talking to, we were going to go on a date and then he just fully ghosted me, but I had screenshot his profile to show to my friends and whatnot. And from we were like just trying to find out who is this guy, like what did you? And we actually found based on a picture, he was standing at a window in his office and you could see the buildings behind him. Based on that, we figured out what buildings were behind him. So what building was he in? What floor he must have been on, figured out where he worked. I knew his first name, figured out where I literally found him. I didn't ever reach out or anything. But it was like, that was actually a moment where I was like, whoa, 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 what are you doing? And anybody listening to the podcast, don't worry, I don't do that anymore. Don't be scared.
No, this is why you built a podcast. Like, this is why, like, you had it in you. That was just your creativity misguided.
Exactly. Yes. And now it's guided towards a podcast much better. So,
I
oh
love
my
it.
goodness.
No judgment from me here, just sort of admiration.
I always say, like, honestly, like, I think if, my current, career doesn't work out, I may just like open up a private detective office. I feel like I'd do well.
Yes.
And it would be fun, right?
It's probably very lucrative. I don't know.
Yeah, I imagine it is. And it would just be, you can kind of get like a thrill from it. I'm not encouraging anybody to start stalking anybody, but when you're like finding information, you're like, "Ooh, look, this ties here and this."
Yeah. That's why it can be so addictive too, because when you get the little dopamine hit and you're like, "Ooh, I found something." And it's kind of that rush, and then you're like, get more of that.
Right. But then there is also the downside of it. I know just from like, okay, say you are looking at the guy's profile who didn't work out with, you see another woman, you click on her profile. Oh, look, there's a picture of them together. They're actually engaged now.
Right.
And now you're like, ugh, like you feel that
right. And then,
shame.
And the only reason you feel that sense of shame is because then your brain is like, see, I told you this belief is true, that you're never enough and no one's ever going to find you attractive. And see, here's the evidence.
Yep.
Yeah, because on some subconscious level, your brain is looking for that evidence again to prove your belief system true, which is just that innocent little thought that we all have. And I just also want to say this. If you have that like not enoughness, not, I don't matter, I'm not valuable, I'm not worthy to be chosen or anything like that, there is nothing wrong with you. This is something that humans are having collectively. Like, we are experiencing this belief system collectively. And the way that this wasn't happening like 50,000 years ago. Like, our human ancestors were not having this challenge presented to them. But a lot of our problems now are mental, not all of them, but a lot of them. And a lot of them are shame-based. And that's created in the mind. Because these are abstract threats that are created in the mind. Because a thought like, I'm not enough, you can't measure that in tangible reality. It doesn't exist in tangible reality. There is no like enoughness-o-meter. Like, right? Like, you can't stand on a scale and be like, yep, Melly, you're only 40% enough. Like, that's not a thing.
Right.
And so why did we develop these beliefs? Everyone on some level has had this sense of low self-worth. They've felt shame. They have felt these things before. And I always find it fascinating that we're just at our point in our evolution where I really believe it is useful. It is the useful challenge in our point in time to overcome, because when we overcome this, we transform not only our relationships, but our lives, like so many things. And so I think there is purpose in experiencing this belief. I mean, I experienced a sense of not enoughness from the time I was 5, every single day, multiple times a day, up until the age of about 30, when I de-identified from that belief. And de-identifying from that belief is really experiencing being separate from it. And when you fully experience your awareness being separate from a thought, the thought just doesn't have the hold on anymore. You're not identified with it anymore. And so it just doesn't take like it used to. Or you just simply stop believing it. It really just doesn't. It's like almost the belief shifts itself. But one of the reasons why we developed these beliefs, this not enoughness, this shame-based view of ourselves, is because when our human ancestors were evolving and living in a time where there were real life and death threats literally everywhere outside of them, the brain started to scan subconsciously for threats. Is there a bear? Is there a lion? But it wasn't doing this consciously. It was just like subconsciously. Right? Is there enough water? Is there enough food? Is there bears or right? Is there bears or a lion? And this created anxiety, and it helped our human ancestors survive. And that is literally why we are alive. And the brain was smart enough to recognize that there aren't a lot of life and death threats anymore for the majority of us. But the brain was like dumb enough to keep scanning for threats. But instead of scanning for life and death threats, it started scanning for abstract threats. And abstract threats don't even exist. So subconsciously, your brain is going, am I good enough? Am I too much? Am I worthy? Am I lovable? Like it's doing that and you're not consciously thinking about it. But here's how you know that your brain is doing this. You're worried about rejection on the dating scene. You're wondering, or it could even happen at work. It's like, I wonder what my boss is going to say to me, or like, oh, I'm scared to have this conversation with an employee, right? It's that underneath all of that is, oh my God, am I doing something wrong? Am I good enough? It's just the brain being a brain. And we, at our point in our human evolution, we have to learn how to go towards these fears instead of away from them, because our human ancestors had to escape the fear that they experienced. Like when they saw the lion, their body was like, went into fight or flight. That's a big trigger emotion you feel, right? And then they ran away. And then they did not feel that fight or flight emotion. So the brain got hardwired to believe or to operate under the premise of, we need to get negative emotion. We need to get rid of negative emotion at all costs, because otherwise we're going to die. And that is no longer the case. And so now our brain is going, am I good enough? Am I worthy? Am I lovable? Am I valuable? Is anyone going to love me again? And then we're creating the same emotion that our ancestors experienced when they were going to actually die, except for we're not anymore. And then what we try to do is we try to get rid of the emotion by either stalking the guy obsessively, thinking about him obsessively, worried obsessively, right? And and none of these are helping us. And so we've got to change our relationship with negative emotion and the thoughts that create them in order to rebuild our confidence.
Right. I love that. Thank you so much. This has been just so, I think, timely for everybody. I mean, I get messages all the time on Instagram and just through email of like listeners that are like, okay, I'm through the divorce, but like no one will want me. Like this is like just, and they state it as a fact. And so I hope for those of you who have messaged me about this, that you have listened to this episode. I will be sending it to some of you. And Sheilanova, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and giving us such practical tools for rebuilding confidence after rejection. Those listening, if you would like to learn more about Sheilanova's work, please connect with her over on Instagram. Her username is @Sheilanova, or you can also go to her resource that she has. It is superpoweryourmind.com/unlock. And you will get a guide on unlocking emotional security, how to master the ultimate skill for anxious attachment, obsessive rumination, and relationship anxiety. So if this conversation resonated with you, please share this episode with someone who might need a reminder that rejection isn't the end of their story. It can actually be the beginning of building a stronger, more grounded version of themselves. Thank you, Sheilanova, for being here today. I really appreciate it.
You are so welcome. I love you so much, Melly.
So see you all next time. Bye. Thanks for listening to Diamonds and Dumpster Fires. If today reminded you that resilience is a practice, not a personality trait, you're in the right place. Keep showing up, keep rebuilding, and don't forget, even diamonds start as pressure and mess. For more faith-filled encouragement and real-life tools to help you heal and grow, check out the show notes for some free resources and ways to stay connected. See you next time.